August 18th, 1944. Camp Swift, Central Texas. A convoy of trucks rolled through the gates, churning dust into the afternoon heat. At the back of the last vehicle sat Liselot Schaefer, a 22-year-old German nurse whose lips were cracked, whose tongue felt thick as leather, whose last memory of clean water belonged to a world that no longer existed. She expected cruelty. She expected punishment. What she saw instead made no sense at all. A pipe thick as a man's arm, pouring crystal-clear water into a wooden trough with such abundance that it overflowed, spilling uselessly into the Texas dirt. Water wasted. Water that would have saved a street in Bremen. And in that moment, clutching a cold American canteen to her chest as tears carved lines through the dust on her face, Liselot realized everything she had been told about the enemy was a lie. Before we continue, if you're enjoying these untold stories from World War II, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, whether it's Berlin, Boston, or Brisbane. Your support helps keep these forgotten voices alive. And if you stay until the end, you'll discover how a single drink of water began dismantling years of propaganda, one truth at a time. The journey to that Texas gate had begun 18 months earlier, in a Bremen that was slowly dying from the inside out. By 1943, Allied bombing raids had transformed Germany's northern port city into a landscape of broken pipes and shattered mains. The municipal water system, once the pride of Frisian engineering, now functioned in desperate fragments. Taps ran for 1 hour each morning, 1 hour each night, if the pipes weren't severed by the previous night's bombs. Families queued with buckets at street pumps. Liselot's mother saved gray dishwater to boil potatoes, then used it again to scrub floors. Nothing was wasted. Nothing could be wasted. By 1944, the official ration had dropped to perhaps 5 liters per person per day. Not just for drinking, but for cooking, washing, everything. The mathematics of survival were brutal and exact. Liselot had trained as an auxiliary nurse when the war still seemed glorious, when victory felt inevitable. She had followed Wehrmacht units westward as the front collapsed, tending wounds in field hospitals where morphine ran out before bandages did, where surgeons operated by candlelight. She measured water in tablespoons. She learned to recognize dehydration by the hollow look in a soldier's eyes, the papery feel of skin that had forgotten moisture. When the Allies broke through in France, her unit surrendered. The transport across the Atlantic had been worse than the field hospitals. 1 canteen per day, 1 liter. Spill it and you might as well have opened your veins. German radio had prepared them for what came next. Camps, hard labor, starvation, perhaps worse. The propaganda had been specific about what happened to women captured by the enemy. But as the trucks stopped and guards ordered them out into the furnace heat of a Texas August, Liselot saw something that broke her understanding of reality. The water tower stood perhaps 30 feet high, its dark wooden silhouette stark against the pale sky. From its base, pipes descended in ordered lines. One of those pipes fed a trough that ran the length of a barracks wall, and from that pipe water poured in a steady, careless stream. It splashed, it glittered in the sun, and where it overflowed, it turned dust to mud and simply disappeared into the earth. In Bremen, people had died for less water than was soaking into that ground. Liselot stood frozen as the line of prisoners moved past her. Her mind struggled with the arithmetic. In 1 minute, more clean water vanished into Texas soil than her entire street had seen in a week. And no one stopped it. No guard shouted. No one treasured each drop. It simply ran and ran, as if water was worth nothing at all. A voice broke through her shock. "Move it along, please." The American sergeant's tone was firm, but not harsh. He guided them into shade beside the barracks, checking names against his clipboard. When he reached Lizelot, he followed her gaze to the trough. Something shifted in his face. The official mask slipped. What showed beneath looked almost like pity. "Thirsty?" he asked quietly. Then he turned to a younger guard. "Grab canteens. Full ones, enough for everyone." The guard returned with his arms laden. 40 metal canteens, one for each prisoner. In the convoy across France, guards had rationed half that number with loaded rifles. Here they handed them out like newspapers. When Lizelot took hers, the metal was cool. Condensation had already formed on its surface, tiny drops that slid down and wet her fingers. The weight felt unreal. He unscrewed the cap. The sound seemed loud in the still air. She lifted it, and before the water touched her lips, she smelled it. Nothing. No rust. No swamp taste. No chlorine. Just cold, pure nothing. The first mouthful hit her tongue like ice. Pain shot through her teeth. She swallowed, and the water traveled down her throat, filling a crack in her existence she'd stopped noticing months ago. Her hand shook. She took another sip, smaller, as the Red Cross pamphlets had warned. The metal rim touched her lower lip. Later she would write to a friend. At that moment I understood that everything they had told us could not be true. But in that moment she couldn't think in sentences. Her eyes blurred. Warmth rose from her chest into her throat. Tears spilled over, mixing with dust, carving clean lines down her face. Around her, some prisoners looked away. Others stared as if witnessing something obscene. Water, simple water, had accomplished what months of war could not. It had broken her. The contrast was a knife blade. German civilians in 1944 survived on roughly 2,500 calories per day, a figure that plummeted to 1,200 calories as the Reich crumbled in early 1945. In some bombed cities, rations dropped to 800 calories, less than concentration camp prisoners received. Meanwhile, Camp Swift's prisoners ate the same rations as American soldiers, 3,200 calories daily. The Geneva Convention of 1929 established these standards, but America didn't just meet them, it exceeded them. Breakfast meant porridge, bread, real coffee. Lunch brought beans, cornbread, meat. Dinner offered portions that left German prisoners staring at their trays in disbelief, unable to finish meals that would have fed a family back home for 2 days. The paradox cut deeper with every bite. Behind barbed wire, enemy captives ate better than free citizens of the Reich. But the greatest shock came not from the mess hall. It came from a wooden building marked with a red cross, from a tall pipe leading into a tiled room, from the moment an American sergeant named Mills turned a handle and water burst from a showerhead in a hard, clear stream that seemed to have no end. Lizelot and the other women had been ordered to shower. The word alone had made their spines stiffen. They knew what happened in showers. The whispers from home had been specific, dark, laden with implication. They expected gas. They expected death disguised as hygiene. Instead, they found 8 shower heads, white tiles, stacks of gray towels, bars of soap that smelled of clean laundry. Sergeant Mills demonstrated by turning the tap. Water roared out, hot at first, then cooling. "You can mix it," she explained in careful German. "Careful with too hot." Steam rose. For several seconds no one moved. Then one woman stepped forward. Then another. Lissalot peeled off clothes so filthy they nearly stood alone. She stepped barefoot onto cold tile. The first touch of water made her gasp. It hit her shoulder like rain from a high roof, hard and relentless. Heat spread down her neck, her back, her arms. The sound filled her ears, drowning thought. Dirt that had lived in the creases of her hands for months melted away in gray streams. She reached for soap. The smell went straight to a deep place in her mind. Her mother hanging sheets in Bremen, Saturday baths before the firestorms, a world where cleanliness was routine rather than miracle. She lathered her arms, her chest, her thin legs. The water turned dark as it spiraled down the drain. Beside her, another woman leaned her forehead against tile and wept openly. No one hurried them. No one counted seconds. When Lissalot finally turned off the tap, her skin was pink from heat, her hair heavy with clean water. She dried herself with a rough towel and reached for new clothes. Prisoner of war uniform, the letters stenciled clearly across the back. Yet these clothes were softer, cleaner than anything she'd worn in a year. The thought twisted inside her. She was more comfortable as a labeled prisoner than she'd been as a free woman of the Reich. The days that followed established a rhythm that made no sense by any logic Lissalot understood. Wake at 5:30, roll call at 6 o'clock, breakfast. Work from 8 o'clock to noon, lunch. Work from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, free time until supper. Lights out at 10 o'clock. 8 hours of work, exactly as the Geneva Convention specified. The Americans counted their prisoners twice daily with bureaucratic precision. Names, numbers, heads. Lissalot worked in the camp laundry, where steam filled the air and big metal drums sloshed water and white cloth in endless rotation. After months of hand-washing bandages in cold water, until they disintegrated, the abundance felt obscene. Fresh uniforms arrived by truck. Torn cloth was cut into rags without hesitation. Supplies came on schedule, not as desperate dreams. At noon the whistle blew for lunch. The smell of beans and cornbread met them halfway to the mess hall. In the afternoon, a notice appeared. English class, tonight, 7 o'clock, and barrack 12. Lissalot went out of curiosity more than hope. Inside, benches had been pushed together. A chalkboard leaned against the wall. About 30 prisoners sat waiting, men on one side, women on the other. At the front stood Corporal Jenkins, an American with rolled sleeves and chalk dust on his fingers. "I am Corporal Jenkins," he said in careful German. "Tonight, English." The room smelled of chalk and old wool. Outside, cicadas hummed. Inside, voices repeated in uncertain rhythm. "I am." "You are." "We are." Jenkins didn't look like a monster. He looked like a tired schoolteacher. When he caught Lissalot's eye, he smiled, shy and awkward. Later, one prisoner would write in the camp newsletter. It was the strangest sight. Barbed wire outside, grammar charts inside. After class, a young guard fell into step beside them. "Good?" he asked in broken German. "Yes," Lissalot answered in broken English. He nodded. "My sister," he said, thumping his chest. Learns German at college. The idea shocked her. His sister in an American college, her in a bombed German city, and here they were, meeting in the middle of nowhere, Texas. By October, outside work began. Prisoners who passed medical screening could volunteer for labor on local farms and in canning plants, earning 80 cents per day in camp scrip. Lissalot climbed into a flatbed truck with 11 others. 2 guards sat at the front, rifles across their knees, but hands relaxed. As the truck rolled out the main gate, past the last coil of wire, Lissalot felt her stomach flutter. Freedom was only meters away, yet she was leaving it behind under guard. The road ran through low hills dotted with mesquite. In the distance, wide squares of green marked irrigated fields. Silver lines of water glinted along ditches. The smell of damp earth rose into dry air. They reached the cannery, a long metal building, where machines clanked and the sharp sweet smell of tomatoes hung thick and humid. Lissalot's job was simple. Watch fruit roll past on belts under jets of water that splashed and ran in constant streams. The water poured off the sides into drains and disappeared. 20,000 cans per day, the foreman explained through an interpreter. That much food sealed in metal, rolling out to feed soldiers and civilians across America and beyond. At noon, they stopped for lunch. American women who worked there brought out thick sandwiches of ham and cheese, pickles, apples, large tin jugs of weak lemonade. An older woman in a flowered dress sat near Lissalot. "German?" she asked slowly. "Yes," Lissalot answered, the word tasting strange. The woman nodded. "My boy's in France, fighting you. But you're here now. You work hard, you eat." There was no hate in her voice, just a simple rule. Work, then food. Through the fall, Lissalot went out 2 or 3 days a week. Sometimes to the cannery, sometimes to a dairy farm where a windmill turned slowly, pumping water up into a high tank that fed troughs running along the pasture. Clean water flowed in thin, steady lines, enough to keep the troughs full. Birds splashed in the shallow ends. The ground around was always muddy. In Bremen, streets had become open sewers. Here, water was so abundant that birds bathed in it for pleasure. Then, one cloudy afternoon, a letter arrived. Gray paper, rough, covered in stamps and official marks. Her mother's handwriting crawled across the front, thin but careful. Inside one page, parts blacked out by censors. "My dear L., we received news through the Red Cross that you are in America." The lines painted a world Lissalot could see too clearly. Bremen burned, 60% of the city gone. Water mains broken for weeks. Hours queuing at a single pump. Food was worse. Official rations down to 800 calories per day. Mostly bread, thin soup from turnips and cabbage. "We dig in the gardens for anything," her mother wrote. Then one line that made Lissalot blink hard. "They say in the camps there is enough to eat. If that is true, be glad, my child." Lissalot stared at the words until they blurred. She heard again the rush of water from the trough, the endless hiss of cannery jets. She felt the solid weight of American bread in her stomach. She was a prisoner, but she was safer, cleaner, better fed than her own mother. That night, lying awake, she turned the letter over and over. The war had begun with flags and promises. It was ending with numbers on ration cards and miles of broken pipe. In spring 1945, news reached the camp in broken pieces. A guard's newspaper left on a table. Jenkins in class drawing a rough map on the board. "War in Europe nearly finished," he said, tapping Germany. Then came photographs. Newspapers and magazines spread on a table, images so dark and crowded that at first Lissalot didn't understand. Then her stomach turned. Piles of bodies in striped cloth, eyes open and empty, faces like skulls with skin. "For years," Jenkins said quietly, "your radio said these places are work camps. Healthy, necessary." One man at the back stood up, face red. "It is a lied trick," he said in German. Jenkins nodded once. "Some of you think that, but these pictures come from many places." The paradox cut deep. The same country that talked of honor built these places of slow death. The same enemy who held her behind wire had opened those gates and given survivors soup and blankets. Later, writing in a camp newsletter, one prisoner would say, "Our camps became small schools for democracy." In May, Germany surrendered. At roll call, the sergeant simply said, "For you, not much changes. Papers, transport, many things to arrange. You will go home." Time means months, then years for some. Life settled into strange peace. More classes opened. Agriculture, carpentry, English, civics. Jenkins drew charts showing 3 branches of government. "Not perfect," he said. "We have problems. But when leaders lie, newspapers can say so. When leaders break law, courts can stop them. You must build something like this." One American pamphlet explained the Marshall Plan. Billions of dollars worth of aid to rebuild Europe over several years. Lissalot stared at the words. The nation that dropped bombs on her city was now planning to send money and machines to fix it. This was not propaganda. This was reality. In 1946, her name appeared on a repatriation list. On her last evening, she walked alone to the fence near the water tower. The pipe still poured water into the trough. It still overflowed. The sound of the splash was the same as on her first day. She stood there a long time, canteen in hand, now full because she'd filled it herself without asking permission. She raised it and drank slowly. Tears came again, different now. Not for what she'd lost, but for what she'd learned. Hundreds of thousands of German prisoners passed through camps like Swift. They arrived expecting chains and hunger. They found strict but ordered worlds of hot meals, clean water, and books. Behind barbed wire, they discovered their enemy didn't match the pictures painted by their leaders. Many went home to cities in ruins, carrying memories of Texas fields, overflowing troughs, and classrooms where freedom was drawn in chalk. The paradox would shape a generation. They came as conquerors. They left as students. In the long shadow of war, those memories mattered. They learned that abundance could be a weapon more powerful than bombs. That meeting hatred not with revenge but with stubborn, everyday humanity could change minds that propaganda never could. And they learned that sometimes the hardest prison to escape is not made of wire and wood, but of lies believed for so long they became truth. Until one drink of cold, clean water washes it all away.